Hello and welcome to Beyond the News. I'm your host Muhammad Asad. In tonight's edition of the program, we will be discussing about the PTI government likely to present second mini budget in January. Trump administration to withdraw United States troops from Syria. Woodnote Films recently launched a documentary on snow leopards. Khatija Kazmi dreams big for Pakistan's women football. But first, our top story tonight. Within a year of taking oath, the PTI-led federal government may now present its second mini-budget to the parliament next month. According to Finance Minister ASAD Umar, this proposal has not yet been finalized, but with looming macroeconomic uncertainty and unsustainability of the current level of fiscal deficit, it is likely that the second mini-budget will be introduced to address these structural problems. While giving a briefing to the Senate Standing Committee on Finance and Revenue regarding the state of negotiations with the IMF, ASAD Umar disclosed that Pakistan has secured $3 billion loan from Saudi Arabia at 3.18% interest rate. He added that the Saudi oil facility on deferred payment will also become effective from next month, when Pakistan will start receiving $274 million oil on a monthly basis. Recently, ASAD Umar also informed the IMF delegation headed by Harold Finger that certain reforms will be undertaken by the government to expand the tax net. Now it has been reported that Pakistan has offered IMF to impose 190 billion rupees worth of additional taxes to restrict budget deficit to 2.2 trillion rupees. Not only this, the Ministry of Finance has also agreed to further increase interest rates as well as devalue the rupee to increase foreign exchange reserves to $13 billion. This aggressive policy will have strong repercussions on the overall economy, as it will likely stifle economic growth rate and add to the inflation woes. Now, to further discuss the topic, we now join Shahbaz Rana, our economic correspondent. Thank you very much for joining us, Shahbaz.
Thank you, Asad.
Shahbaz, two mini-budget proposals in less than 6 months of coming into power. Is PTI right in its strategy to introduce supplementary reforms, or does it contribute to more confusion?
This is the most important question. Well, the PTI government had given its first mini budget in September this year, and within 4 months there is now a talk for another budget, which shows, one, that the government had not done its work at the time when it presented the first budget, and number two, it was obvious that this time the reason is the IMF, not the other reasons. If it was only a matter of time, because we were anticipating another mini budget, there was not clarity on part of the government what it wanted to do. When the government launched the first budget in September, and there was a claim by the finance minister that the fiscal consolidation will be equal to roughly 2.1% of GDP, that is about rupees 800 billion. But when we looked at the revised numbers, we did not find that much revenue or expenditure efforts to cut the budget deficit down to 5.1%, which was the revised target. And now what we see after the recent talks with the IMF, the government is now projecting the budget deficit at 6.1% of the GDP, and this is the thing that clearly shows the government did not have either it didn't have a policy, or it did not have an idea what kind of measure it was taking that would generate sufficient revenues to hit the downward revised annual tax collection target of rupees 4.4 trillion. During first 5 months of this fiscal year, we have seen that the revenue collection is only 5.5% higher than the previous year. This is even lower than the nominal GDP rate. That means there is huge kind of the discrepancy in the system, or there are huge inefficiencies in the system, and the revenue growth is even less than the nominal GDP growth, which shows also which can hint towards the element of corruption as well. So because of these reasons, now the government in a tight situation where it will have to take roughly rupees 190 to 200 billion additional revenue measures to reach to a point where the budget deficit is equal to 2.2 trillion. But having said that, the IMF is not happy even with this number. It wants more from Pakistan. The proposed revised budget deficit target by the government is 5.6%, which requires about rupees 2.2 trillion additional borrowings in this fiscal year, but IMF wants that this number should be around 2 trillion. So that is the point where the talks are held right now.
What will be the impact of government offering IMF nearly 190 billion rupees in new taxes to acquire bailout? Are these taxes going to negatively impact domestic products?
Well, there is a question mark on the strategy of the PTI government. Before coming into power, Mr. Asad Umar used to say that there is a need to increase the direct taxes, and he would also criticize the withholding taxes, which the previous PMLN government increased manifold. Now, when we look at the proposed tax measures, which although the government has not officially announced, the proposed measures are again are kind of indirect in nature. They are going to increase the sales tax rates on the petroleum products. Then there is also a proposal to increase the petroleum development levy. The third major proposal is to increase the sales tax rates on the domestic sales of 5 export oriented sectors like the textile, garments, carpets and leather and surgical and sports goods. All these things, it means the prices of all these products would increase in the market. Not only that, the other measures like increasing the withholding tax rates on the non-filers. People don't like to come into the tax net, and they would prefer to pay additional cost in terms on account of the additional withholding tax rate, but would then build on this additional cost into the price of the good. So they are at the end of the day not affected by the increase in tax rates. All these measures will increase inflation in the country, and secondly, this will increase burden on the people more, and this is also against the philosophy of the PTI government.
Now, Shahbaz, if the government had to make necessary structural reforms, then why did the Ministry of Finance wait for so long to introduce these austerity measures?
Well, it seems that the government is in a state of denial. One day it says that it is in the IMF talks, the other day it says that we do not need IMF, we are not in a hurry. So this kind of state of denial is adding more cost to the economy. Had the government been into the in kind of staff level agreement with the IMF, the pace of reforms and even the extent of reforms could have been lower. We have already increased the discount rate by about 4.25% since January. Then we have devalued the currency by around 33%, and we have imposed 125 billion additional taxes in September. Despite all this, the IMF is not okay with the reform package, and it is asking for more and more. This is for the first time when we see that these kind of actions are taken even before reaching a staff level agreement. Usually it happens that whenever there is a staff level agreement with the IMF, there is a gap of around 2 months between the staff level agreement and the approval of the loan from the IMF board. The purpose of that particular gap used to be to give the sufficient time to the government to implement those measures which we call the prior actions. Now, even before agreeing to the staff level agreement, undertaking all these measures is not only creating uncertainty in the market because the government remains in the denial mode, and at the same time it requires more actions because the IMF is not recognizing the simple reason being, even if you have devalued your currency by 33% and increased the interest rate by 4.25%, ideally and theoretically the foreign exchange reserve should have increased, but these reserves are not increasing because these are the isolated measures. Whenever there is an IMF program, you have to have all the measures under a certain set of arrangements where there will be some triggering elements which would then increase the reserves. The ADB and the World Bank would jump in. They would also start providing finances. That things are not happening, and because of that, the measures that we have taken in past 11 months, including the 4 months of this government, are not yielding the required results.
Is financial aid from friendly countries really sufficient for Pakistan for current year, as it has been repeatedly stated by Asad Umar?
Yeah, it seems that the aid that Pakistan is expecting from the UAE, China and Saudi Arabia would be sufficient to meet Pakistan's needs till June 2019. But beyond June 2019, we don't have any cover even from these 3 friendly countries. We are anticipating about $6 to $8 billion from these countries in shape of direct loan, then the commercial loans, and the third one is the oil on the deferred payments. And this is based on the assumption that Pakistan's current account deficit, which was $19 billion in the last fiscal year, would come down to $13 billion. I don't see that happening. Primarily during the first 5 months of this fiscal year, the current account deficit is down by only $800 million. That means it may come down by another $2 billion or $2.5 billion. Essentially it will be around $14 to $15 billion. And the assumption here is $13 billion current account deficit. And if the deficit remains above $13 billion, then there could be a gap about $2 billion again, which the government may have to fill in some kind of emergency by arranging some additional commercial loans.
Shahbaz, State Bank Governor Tariq Bajwa said that the State Bank of Pakistan did not devalue rupee without the consultation of the government. Do you think the government should ensure that SBP remains independent in its decision making, or should Asad Umar take some of the blame for rupee devaluation?
Well, there are two ways to look at this, theoretically and legally as well. The State Bank of Pakistan is independent, and it should not it should not take the federal government or even the finance minister into the confidence. But practically speaking, all these measures have political implications, and the historically all the state bank governors used to inform the finance minister even before taking those measures. We have seen kind of a more aggressive regime during the last 5 years, when the value of the rupee would be determined by the then finance minister, Mr. Ishaq Dar, who would used to say that arranging the external finances was the responsibility of the Ministry of Finance. So it does have a role in determining the value of the rupee. Because of that kind of thinking, there was a direct intervention by the then finance minister and the finance ministry into the affairs of the central bank. The PTA government has kind of different strategy, and it probably believes in it, that there should be minimum role of the finance ministry into the affairs of the State Bank of Pakistan. And what Mr. Asad Umar said yesterday in a meeting of the Senate Standing Committee on Finance, that the central bank governor informed him about the need of currency adjustment in the market because of growing gap, rather the spread between the open market rate and the interbank interest rate, interbank exchange rate. And Mr. Asad's view was that the adjustment should be low and it should be gradual, but the governor's view was that it should be kind of sudden and big adjustment. But according to Mr. Asad, he was not in knowledge of the timing of the adjustment as well as the quantum of the adjustment, and so does the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I can say that yes, the governor had informed the finance minister, but probably he was not in full picture.
Thank you very much for joining us and updating us about the PTI-led federal government's second expected mini budget in first year of taking oath. That was Shahbaz Rana, our economic correspondent. And it's time now for a short break. We'll be back with more stories and updates. Welcome back to Beyond the News. Moving on to our next section of today's program, withdrawal of United States troops from Syria. In a sudden move, the US Trump administration has said that it will withdraw US troops stationed in Syria after proclaiming that the Islamic State militant group has been defeated. While President Trump proclaimed that the militant group remains defeated and that there is no further reason for the United States to stay, many insiders and officials of both the White House and Pentagon believe that the goal should not just be limited to defeating militancy, but ensuring that Syria does not remain a battleground for future proxy wars to play out. President Trump has now ordered the withdrawal of all 2,000 American ground troops from Syria within 30 days. But Pentagon refrained from giving details, saying that the transitional phase remains a sensitive matter. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham rebuked this recent decision, saying that the withdrawal will be a mistake and a big win for Iran, Bashar al-Assad of Syria, and Russia. Reacting towards the decisions, Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said that the US decision could result in genuine, real prospects for a political settlement in Syria. As Turkey now prepares to further attack the North Syrian region, many Kurdish forces who have been allies of the United States fear that the recent withdrawal decision will have them in a vulnerable position, unable to defend themselves. While the United States may be pulling out its troops from Syria, this does not signal the end of the global coalition in the fight against Islamic State. United Kingdom and France have already said that they remain committed to their end goal of defeating Islamic State, and apart from this, Russia will continue to protect its strategic interests, and that includes protecting Bashar al-Assad as well. To further discuss the topic, we now join Mr. Ghalib Iqbal, former Pakistani ambassador to France and a seasoned diplomat. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you so much.
Now, sir, what do you make of President Trump's decision to withdraw United States troops from Syria? Is the fight against Islamic State really over? And has the militant group been defeated as proclaimed?
I think the first and foremost question which we need to ask ourselves is that as to why the US went into that region in the first place. And secondly, why are they withdrawing at this sensitive moment? Because the objectives as outlined by the US administration have not been met so far. If extremism, terrorism has been reduced in the region, then you can say that yes, the objectives have been met. But seeing the reports from all over the international media and through other agencies and other channels, I think it is probably a bit premature for the United States to withdraw from the area.
Now, many analysts say that Trump made this decision going against his own advisors. Does such a decision show that there are rifts within the administration?
I think combining the two topics probably would not be a wise thing to do so, because the rifts within the US administration, I am not the correct person to talk about it, but I can talk about the international politics and the foreign policy objectives of any country, including our own. I think these are two totally different subjects what we are talking about. The establishment says that the objectives have not been met, whereas the President and the White House and his spokesperson has said that the objectives have been met. So there is a dichotomy, of course, we know there is a dichotomy, but to what level we do not know. At what depth we do not know. So this needs to be seen in the coming days, probably in the next 3 to 4 days, that as to what is the level of dichotomy between the establishment and what has been announced by the President.
And rather than focusing on a global solution towards bringing peace in Syria, don't you believe that simply withdrawing troops will leave a power vacuum in the middle?
Yeah, but there are other troops also at the moment. Even the Soviet troops are there. The Russian troops are there, about 63,000. And there are many other troops, but warring factions are there. There are so many people like Kurdistan security personnel are there, which have been trained by the US and the coalition forces. Turkey and the Kurds, they don't want to work together because they have different reasons to settle their scores. And Turkey was, in fact, wanted to attack the Syrian Kurdistan. But when the US President met the Turkish President a few days ago, he never discussed this withdrawal with him. So I think it has taken everybody by a surprise. It has not only taken the world by a surprise, but it has also taken the policymakers within the United States by a surprise. So I think it's a bit premature for them to withdraw. Even if they had decided to withdraw, they should have given a time frame, not 30 days, 60 days or less than 100 days, probably 3 months period, and they could have discussed it threadbare before going public with this announcement.
And sir, don't you think that this withdrawal will further destabilize the war-torn region, as Turkey, Russia and Iran, they will all look to protect their vested interests with no holding back?
Yeah, these things happen. These things happen as a result of, even if one party pulls out, there are people who are going to fill in that vacuum. There are countries which are going to fill in that vacuum. If you compare the situation with Afghanistan, when the USSR withdrew from Afghanistan, there was a vacuum. And many other forces occupied that vacuum. They filled in that vacuum. Similarly, even in Syria, we are going to have a similar situation, because in Syria, the people, the countries and the vested groups, they all have certain interests. The interest ranges from political hegemony to military hegemony, and also to control the vital supplies of oil and the region. So there is, obviously, we are going to see the vacuum is there, but ultimately it would be filled in by another country or a group of people.
And my last question to you would be, what is Pakistan's stance been on Syria? Has it always been a contentious issue to decide our alliance either with the United States or Russia?
No, what Pakistan's position is very clear about this issue, because Pakistan says that the territorial integrity of Syria should be respected and all the issues should be handled and managed politically by negotiations. That is our official position, and we are not going to budge on that position or change our position just because one country is withdrawing its troops from there. No, that's not the way how it's done over here, because Pakistan has always stated in this position and many other issues all over the world. If you look at such conflicts, our position is very clear about that, and we are not going to side either with Russia or with United States on the issue, because we feel that Syria being a Muslim country and Syria being a country which is at war not only with itself but also with many other vested groups, they should have peace. People deserve peace over there and they should be allowed to have peace over there.
Now, what future do you see for the region after the withdrawal of United States troops from Syria? Do you think that it will bring peace, or would it deteriorate further prospects of peace in the region?
I don't see peace coming to the region in the near future, because the world politics at this particular moment, it is being generated from this region. No, all the interests, the interest in oil, the interest in minerals, the interest in geopolitical situation, the interest in territory, everything is being generated from this particular region. And I do not see that till such time those objectives are met by various countries in the region or beyond the region, that we will have peace over there. It's very unfortunate, but I think it's also true that I don't see any peace in the near future over there.
Thank you very much for joining us. That was Ghalib Iqbal, a former ambassador to France and a seasoned diplomat, discussing about the withdrawal of United States troops from Syria. And it's time now for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Welcome back after the break. Moving on to our next segment of the day, wildlife in Pakistan. Globally speaking, wildlife and biodiversity are under major threats due to humanity's irresponsible actions. According to the World Wildlife Foundation, since the year 1970, humanity has wiped out 60% of the animal populations. In Pakistan, encroachment of national parks and mountainous regions that were previously the habitat of local animals increases the chances of animal attacks on humans as well as livestock. Such confrontation leads to retaliatory killing of animals like snow leopards, which is still a critically endangered species. Ministry of Climate, with the help of Wildlife Department, have increased their efforts to draft a consolidated policy to stop illegal hunting, trafficking, and to give proper attention to wildlife conservation. With the help of WWF, Ministry of Climate also initiated the very first spatial monitoring and reporting tool, Smart System, which is a snow leopard monitoring patrolling system given to Gilgit-Baltistan Wildlife Department. More efforts need to be taken in the right direction, but most importantly, there is the crucial aspect of creating more awareness for our environment, biodiversity, and wildlife that form an ecosystem in which we all live in. For this purpose, Woodnote Films created a visually appealing, mesmerizing, and a humanistic documentary about the magical creature that lives far up in the Gujarat region, the snow leopard. The documentary, titled Pursuit of Phantom, was produced by Abdullah Khan and Riaz Muhammad, founders and directors of Woodnote Films, with the help of field biologists and other experts. To hear more about this documentary as well as the wildlife in Pakistan, we now join Calista Vaughan Shamir. She is the Public Relations Officer for Woodnote Films. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So what was the main motivation behind this amazing documentary?
The main motivation was actually to find and film the cat and to get up close and personal shots, as we say, of the cat and its intimate behavior. That was a challenge in itself.
And what were the logistic issues that you guys faced in capturing the images of this elusive snow leopard?
Well, the logistics start with the fact that it's a very, very inhospitable climate. You have temperatures that are well below freezing. So you have to be able to exist in that climate outside for weeks or months at a time in order to spend the time that you need to capture those images.
Oh, that's a long time, like
Yeah.
just to capture a few images. I like that the documentary focused on the human angle of encroachment and retaliatory killing. Why are these aspects important to study when it comes to the wildlife conservation?
It's very important to understand why you have retaliatory killings. And you have retaliatory killings because these are predators. And as the human population increases and as climate change happens, you get more and more encounters between the predators and livestock.
So what is the biggest threat to the survival of snow leopards in Pakistan other than humans?
Climate change.
Climate
Change
change
is going to fragment their habitat. It'll probably do away with at least a third, and it will fragmentize another third. That makes it very difficult because habitat loss is a big problem for these species.
So are the snow leopards only limited to the Khunjerab National Park in the Pakistan, or are they inhabited at other places in the country as well?
Well, basically in the north, they have other areas in which they live, but Khunjerab National Park is the park that it's...
And in recent years, the government has announced a policy of restricted trophy hunting. In your opinion, do you even think that the hunting should be allowed in Pakistan?
By all means, regulated and well-monitored trophy hunting. These are programs that help the communities around the areas where these animals live. And if you help the communities and you are able to increase the income that communities have, that gives them a reason to protect the species. So the markhor and the ibex trophy hunting that is going on in these areas is a good development.
All right, so what recommendations would you give to the government when it comes to actually protecting these species, these endangered species?
Any recommendation I would give would start with the syllabus in schools. It's very important that we
create that awareness.
To create the awareness. Awareness is more than half of the battle. We screened this documentary in Germany, at the German embassy in Islamabad, and there were schools present, and one of the students came up to me and he said, I didn't even know we had these animals in Pakistan, now I know. And that's exactly where it starts, is with awareness.
Let's say if the awareness is created, people know that these are the endangered species. What steps can an individual take in their own capacity to protect these endangered species and the biodiversity?
Protecting the biodiversity starts at your home. You start to. This sounds banal, but it's actually quite true. Just by regulating water use, reducing the amount of waste that you send into the environment, because a lot of the biodiversity is being lost due to pollution, due to plastic bags, due to things that we actually have under our control. So you can start with that. You can start with spending time with your children outside, outdoors, looking at the wildlife, appreciating it, so your children gain an understanding and appreciation for it.
And lastly, I would like you to shed some lights on the documentaries that you've done as Woodnote Films. Like what other birds and animals that you guys have made documentaries on, apart from the snow leopard?
Well, we actually have a pilot film for a series called Wild Wonders of Pakistan, which was filmed in Swat. And that covers the partial life cycle of 3 birds. It covers the Indian paradise flycatcher, it covers the white-throated kingfisher, and also the common kingfisher, which are beautiful birds that you have here in Pakistan. They're not that uncommon. And by showing these birds' lives, and these are birds many children can see all over the country, perhaps we reach people's minds and hearts.
Thank you very much for joining us, and it was really my pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That was Kalaster Von Shamir, Public Relations Officers for Woodnote Films, discussing about the latest documentary made by Woodnote Films on the snow leopard in Khunjerab region in Pakistan. And it's time now for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Welcome back after the break. Moving on to our last segment of today's program, a dream for football. Football usually does not get the same attention as other sports do in Pakistan due to systematic neglect. The quality of the sport played in Pakistan is not up to the mark, and it is rightly reflected in the FIFA rankings as well. The men's team ranks 199th in the world, and the women's football team does not even hold a ranking currently due to inactivity in the past 18 months. But this does not mean that the spirit of football has also died down. For the youth of the country, the sport represents the same universal message and values that other countries rightly carry with them. Efforts are being taken on an individual as well as organizational level to revive the sport, but lack of funding and most importantly, the attention still hurts the prospects. We want to highlight one particular story tonight, and it is a story of a young girl who had always been passionate about the sport. Khatija Kazmi has been playing football ever since she was a little girl and has accomplished so much for the football industry in Pakistan. Last year, Khatija Kazmi became the first Pakistani woman to have secured a place for the FIFA Masters course at the Manford University in Leicester. She was among the 32 students selected worldwide for this prestigious course and just recently came back from Europe after completion. Khatija Kazmi joins us now in our studio. Thank you very much for joining us, Khatija. Good to have you in the show.
Thank you.
Khatija, how did your passion for football start, and when did you realize that you want to pursue this as a career?
I don't think I can pinpoint when it started, but I was always involved in sports. I was always interested. Started with cricket, of course. I grew up in Pakistan, but I think in school when the boys started playing football, I started getting involved in football as well. And over time, it kind of grew a lot more. Closer to the end of school, we had created a team for the girls, taken part in a tournament, and I really liked how it made me feel, what I learned from it. And I think over time, I eventually learned that everything that I know about life is because of football. And I was like, everyone needs to feel what I feel, and or at least have the opportunity to get out and play. And that's when it all started.
Now, during school years, you said you used to play alongside boys. So at what point you realized that the women, they need to have their own space, especially in sporting arenas?
I think I always knew that I was always sad that there was not enough space for girls to play, but I also realized that we had to do it on our own. But I think just to take part in competitions, there still are not mixed competitions here. So we had to make sure we make our own team with the women or the girls, all of that. And I also figured out that a lot of the girls are not comfortable playing alongside boys. That means they might like to play, but then they will not feel comfortable. So just to at least make sure that they come out and play means that you need to have a separate system and place for them.
So in a recent interview, you shed some light on a tragedy that made you ever so determined about pursuing this as a career. Can you please tell us about what that change was?
Yes. I suppose a lot of my friends, my social circle came out of football, and there were two other friends who we actually were really determined to start something for girls, because there was a club we had joined and it didn't have a proper system. We were kind of really frustrated by it. We never got coached properly, and there was this one summer we sat down and we decided, let's try and do something about it. But we planned it on a rough paper, but then we all ended up going to university. This one time we all got back together and we decided to take part in the National Women's Championship, which was in Islamabad. Me and another friend, we had gone before, and the third one, Misha, was supposed to join us a little later, except she was never able to join us. That was the time of the Air Blue crash, and when that happened, me and Mashal, the other friend, we decided that was it. We needed to go forward with what we had decided, at least in our memory, and it's the least that we could do. And that's when we had approached Karachi United to start a women's division.
So how did the idea behind Karachi United Football Foundation start, and how's that foundation doing at the moment?
Karachi United existed as a men's club from a lot longer. We had known about it. We approached them to start the women's division, which is also when they were starting the community development program. So it became a foundation. So what it does is try and use football to leverage for uplifting society and social development. And it just realized that, that's our masses, especially in underserved areas, and that's also where the talent is. And it's not that everyone will become footballers, but you might find talent there, so that 1% you might get that. But also if they start getting involved in football, they're going to learn life skills. They'll want to become productive human beings in society. So that was the goal. Also, it was to basically get children off the streets and into something productive. So that was the entire ethos behind the Football Foundation.
So Khatija, why is community development approach so important in changing the mentalities towards football?
That's the masses, and we need to educate them and We need to get them to understand responsibility and life skills and all of that. And that's where, it starts from the grassroots, and we need to realize that. And that's why community development is so important. The educated lot might be a very small percentage, but we need to get everyone on the same board, or at least kind of bridge that gap between all the segments that we have in society.
Now let's talk about international level. Pakistan Football Federation has some significant structural problems. So what are your grievances with the national management? Is it the lack of funding?
No, it's not just that. It's been going on for a long time. It's honestly very depressing, especially for a footballer, because every year is important for them. And if you lose that out, you're a lot behind. There has been inactivity before this for the past 3 years. Then we were banned. Then we finally started doing something in the past three months. And again, we're in this turmoil because the Supreme Court wanted elections. FIFA doesn't want elections. Faisal Salih's been sitting in the same position for about more than 15 years. So it's not lack of funding. I think it's about allocation of the funding and actually development and doing the work.
So the funds are there, but they're not being properly allocated towards the real cause.
Also, there's no professionalism in our society for sport. I went and did my master's, but I thought, I was like, okay, you do your master's, you feel great, you've done a master's, and but I came back here and it's like, okay, what did you do again? So it's like in sports, it's like, do you really need it? All our politicians mainly are sitting in sports positions and all of that, and there's no sort of development. There's no understanding what needs to be done. So we lack professionalism, a proper system, and with that, all of the issues come about.
Okay, now tell us about your experience during the FIFA Masters course. How did this journey come to be?
It was great. It took me a little time to get back into student life, but I think just understanding that they're like-minded people. Over here, because sports is not given much importance, it's very difficult to find like-minded people and understanding the entire world that exists for sport. And we're never taught that here. Even in the Olympics, Pakistan won ages ago in hockey. Kids nowadays don't even know.
Right.
So all of these things, it's an entire world, and we were never taught about it. So it was a great experience. Also going between different countries, the cultures, going to federations. It was just, it was great.
All right. So now, what are your plans for upcoming year, and how are the preparation for SAF of Women's Championships going?
For SAF Women's, sadly, it was supposed to be in December, then it got postponed to February, and now it's postponed to March. Because of that, because of the elections and all of the issues that are happening, we have absolutely no idea if Pakistan will take part in it or not, if we'll end up being banned, or if we'll even ever get to train for the camp. So that is on the side. I think I was waiting for it very eagerly until first it got postponed, then it got postponed again, and then I'm like, okay, maybe I should not be relying on this. But hopefully, we're hoping we take part in it in March. Other than that, future plans, I'm still trying to figure out what the next best step is and what will have the most impact. Plan is to try and develop the industry here, so maybe looking into educational sectors and developing a curriculum with them. But very open to opportunities right now and trying to see where I can actually use all of my knowledge and implement it.
Thank you very much for joining us, Khatija, and it was my pleasure having you on the show and you sharing your insights about your journey in the football world.
All right, thank you.
And that's all we have for tonight's edition, and we will take you tomorrow beyond the news.